Namaskar, good morning, and a hearty welcome to this morning's meeting. And thank you, Mataji, for the wonderful song. We have now had short, but I hope fairly good introductions to the spiritual disciplines of Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. In the two talks on the method of Vedanta, we studied the threefold discipline of Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, hearing, reflection, and meditation of Jnana Yoga. And in the following three talks on approaching God, we studied the threefold discipline of prayer, worship, and meditation of Bhakti Yoga. Today we begin our two-part discourse on working our way to freedom, in which we will be introduced to the secret of work as a spiritual discipline according to Karma Yoga. Now, it is the feeling of almost every thoughtful person that human life is nothing but a chain of never-ending activity. Activity that mostly turns out to be futile or meaningless in the end. We work and work and work, but don't seem to be going anywhere. We long for happiness, security, and peace. We work hard to attain these, but somehow fulfillment seems to elude us. We need ever new types of diversions in order to escape the monotony and boredom of work. So we work mainly with the idea of escaping work, to earn leisure, only to find that our diversions, our recreations don't give us the fulfillment we are looking for. Ideally, work itself should have brought us fulfillment. But as it is, it only leaves us empty and staring at meaninglessness. This has become a typical human situation and has assumed the nature of a crisis. So, why does this happen? What is the cause? The simple answer is, we cultured people have certain higher needs, what we may call values, and work, or to be exact, the way we work fails to satisfy those needs. Work can become satisfying and meaningful only when it is an act of self-expression or a means of some higher experience. If I go to work every day only to earn money and leisure, it is not really my work, it is my boss's work. I may spend the whole day at my workplace, but within myself, I'll be longing to get out of there as soon as I can and do something I like doing. So you see the conflict here. But look at an artist or a scientist. For them, work is not just a means of livelihood. It is also a means of self-expression. That is why they don't need so much leisure or recreation. In their case, work itself brings fulfillment. This problem of work and the related psychological conflict we also face in spiritual life. Especially, this is especially true of monastic communities. Spiritual life is supposed to be the total response of my whole being to my spiritual ideal. And if I feel that the work I do has no connection with that, with my spiritual ideal, my response will not be total. The main struggle in spiritual life is God realization, or to put it in more acceptable terms, the attainment of higher consciousness. But that great struggle becomes fruitful only when my entire personality is thoroughly integrated, when every effort of mine is directly connected with the goal of God realization. It is only when all my physical and mental energies are fully harnessed and geared to the spiritual quest, it is only then that my soul will have the power to demolish the obstacles that stand in the way. So what does that mean? It means the work that I do must become my spiritual discipline in exactly the same way as prayer, worship, and meditation are. Otherwise, work becomes a drag on the soul and it'll sap my energy. So, we must succeed in this task, the task of integrating work into our spiritual quest. We have no other alternative because there is no way we can avoid work. So the challenge is, can we make work an expression of our spiritual aspiration, an expression of our vyakulata or mumukshutva? Can we make it a means of higher spiritual experience? On the one hand, we have to take care of our basic material needs and fulfill our social obligations. And on the other, we have to transcend these very physical and social limitations. Can we reconcile these two? If you remember, about a year ago, we had a talk on the journey of life, where we discussed the two ways of life according to the Vedas, the Pravritti Marga and the Nivritti Marga. The path of dharma or virtue leading to material welfare, and the path of moksha or liberation leading to what they call the ultimate good. A person can follow either of these according to their temperament and their fitness. The main difference between the two paths lie in their goals. The goal of the first one, of the Pravritti Marga, is material prosperity and heavenly enjoyment. And the goal of the Nivritti Marga is God realization and freedom from samsara. Swami Vivekananda called Pravritti Marga turning towards life, wheeling towards life, and Nivritti Marga as turning away from life. Work has a place in both the paths. But while work dominates the first path, it is relegated to the lowest place in the second. Work done in Pravritti Marga is plain virtuous, dharmic work. That is charitable, philanthropic, humanitarian works that are done with a definite motive. And what is that motive? The motive is a better life now and in the next birth, and heavenly enjoyment after death. That is the aim of Pravritti Marga. But work done, but work done in the Nivritti Marga has no such selfish motive, and that alone is karma yoga, whose goal is absolute freedom of the soul. This distinction between karma and karma yoga is an important point we have to note in our study of work. Whenever we use the word yoga, we must understand that the goal of that path is liberation of the soul. Otherwise, it is not yoga. Swami Vivekananda said, all action is an expression of the soul's struggle for freedom, though not all actions necessarily lead to it. This is something important. Selflessness or detachment is the characteristic feature of not only karma yoga, but the whole of Nivritti Marga, which also includes Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Now, for some reason or other, this question, are all yogas equal? And especially, does Karma Yoga directly lead to moksha? These questions have somehow gained a lot of importance. They may be of interest to scholars and dialecticians, but to serious spiritual aspirants, they are of little practical value. Traditionally, it has been held that Karma Yoga is only a preparatory discipline, that it is the lowest of the four yogas, and that its role is only to bring about purity of heart, as if it is something very easy. Against this traditional view, some modern thinkers hold that according to Swami Vivekananda, Karma Yoga can also directly lead to moksha. Anyhow, one of Swamiji's great achievements was converting Advaita Vedanta into a dynamic, practical philosophy of life, which, in addition to being a yoga, could also enable people to solve their day-to-day problems. If Brahman is the only reality, then not only the highest superconscious realization, but every little activity is a self-revelation of Brahman. Of course, one must be conscious of these things. It is Brahman that is manifesting itself through each and every thought and action of ours, through every stream of life, though we are not aware of it. But for a rishi like Swamiji, life was integral. Life itself is religion, and living is nothing but a self-revelation of Brahman. So, his Karma Yoga is based on this integral vision of life. There is no dichotomy between secular and sacred. All life is supposed to be sacred. Though Swamiji was primarily a spiritual teacher, he was still deeply concerned about the material welfare of the masses. He knew very well that it is not possible for the masses to become spiritual all at once. So we find in his massive, complete works, two sets of teaching, as it were. There are exhortations to qualified spiritual aspirants to follow the path of renunciation and spirituality, And there are exhortations to others to build up, to develop character, efficiency, and excellence. A society can prosper and attain a high degree of culture only if it can produce men and women of pure, unselfish, and strong character. Swamiji has again and again pointed out that it is through karma, it is through work that one develops character and willpower. We know that every thought and action leaves an impression, what is called a samskara, in the mind. Swamiji said, character is the sum total of all these samskaras. And one doesn't develop good character by sitting quietly and reading books. One has to actively engage oneself in good work, in selfless service. That is why Swamiji wanted to infuse tremendous rajas, energy, into people to rouse them from tamas, from lethargy. He wanted us to first develop strength to do good deeds and develop a pure character. Conscious, purposeful pursuit of strength, purity, and unselfishness. This Swamiji never tired of encouraging people to cultivate these noble qualities. However, character development is not an end in itself. Let it not surprise you. Character development is not an end in itself. There is a higher purpose to human life. Good samskaras guide the mind along good channels, true. But spiritual life is about attaining higher consciousness, which means transcending the level of the ordinary mind. This is possible only when the mind is freed from even good samskaras. A good character is useful to a spiritual aspirant as a foundation, but that is not the goal. Swami Vivekananda says in his small book, Karma Yoga, there is a still higher stage to attain after one has reached the unalterable good tendency of the mind. Look at the words, the unalterable good tendency of the mind. That means before we embark on our spiritual journey, we must be established in goodness. No amount of evil should be able to swerve us from the path of goodness, from the path of virtue. There is a still higher stage to attain after one has reached the unalterable good tendency of the mind, and that is to be had with an ardent desire for liberation. Liberation from both good and evil. So it is this liberation or moksha that is the goal of Swamiji's Karma Yoga. Yoga should lead to moksha. He said, just by work, one may reach that state of development that Buddha attained through meditation and Christ by prayer. Let's not forget, Karma Yoga is a spiritual discipline and belongs to the Nivritti Marga. So its aim is not character development or even doing good to the world, but moksha, freedom. The first and very basic qualification of a karma yogi is therefore intense aspiration, vyakulata, for liberation, which in Vedanta books is known as mumukshutva, this burning desire for liberation. Now, There are two ways in which karma yoga can be practiced, depending upon whether an aspirant believes in a personal God or not. The main discipline in karma yoga is giving up all attachment. How do karma yogis practice this discipline? If they believe in God, they work as His servants, regarding themselves as mere instruments in His hands. This has a touch of bhakti to it. And if they don't believe in a personal God, and if they don't want to rely on any outside help, they are left to their own devices. They depend on their own inner resources, their own powers of discrimination and dispassion, constantly maintaining the spirit of detachment. There is a shade of jnana in it. So, seen in this way, it would seem that karma yoga is actually a subsidiary to either bhakti yoga or jnana yoga. But this is just an observation on the side. Now, the second type of karma yoga is what Swami Vivekananda refers to as work for work's sake. It is thought to be a new, independent method of attaining liberation through work. But we need to understand this carefully. Just because this method does not require belief in God or divine grace, it doesn't mean that any kind of work done in any way will all automatically lead to moksha. That would be a very wrong understanding. We need to understand the real meaning of the term karma. But we'll discuss this point in detail a little later. But here, let us just keep in mind that karma yoga is more mental than physical, more psychological than mechanical. It is an inner attitude of mind. The mind is constantly influencing the work, and the work is also constantly influencing the mind. So, much depends on attitude. It is significant why Swamiji preferred the phrase work for work's sake instead of the popular duty for duty's sake. To him, duty suggested obligation, compulsion, which meant bondage for the ever-free soul. Whereas his idea of karma yoga was the work of a free individual. He wanted his followers to work as masters, not as slaves. He wanted them to work freely out of love, without being burdened by a sense of duty. We'll be really surprised when we hear what Swamiji thinks about duty as we understand it. He says, Karma Yoga teaches us that the ordinary idea of duty is on the lower plane. We raise it to the skies, as if duty were everything. Duty is on the lower plane. Nevertheless, all of us have to do our duty, yet we see that this peculiar sense of duty is very often a great cause of misery. Duty becomes a disease with us. It drags us ever forward. It catches hold of us and makes our whole life miserable. It is the bane of human life. Look at those poor slaves to duty. Duty leaves them no time to say their prayers, no time to bathe. Duty is ever on them. It is living a slave's life. This is duty as it is understood. The only true duty is to be unattached and to work as free beings, to give up all work unto God. All duties are His. Be at rest, be free, and work. This kind of freedom is a very hard thing to attain. How easy it is to interpret slavery as duty, the morbid attachment of flesh to flesh as duty. People go out into the world and struggle and fight for money or for any other thing to which they get attached. Ask them why they do it. They say it is duty. It is the absurd greed for gold and gain, and they try to cover it with a few flowers. What is duty after all? It is really the impulsion of the flesh, of our attachment. And when an attachment has become established, we call it duty. Very powerful. According to Swamiji, the ideal of duty may be of some good to those who cannot have any higher, spiritual ideal. But he says, those who want to be karma yogis must throw this idea of duty overboard. Whatever you have to give to the world, do give by all means, but not as duty. Do not take any thought of that. Do not be compelled. Why should you be compelled? Everything that you do under compulsion goes to build up attachment. Why should you have any duty? Resign everything unto God. So, to bhaktas who think of themselves as servants to God, mere instruments in His hands, it is obvious that this kind of karma yoga, practiced with an attitude of resignation to the divine, comes under bhakti yoga. This is what Swamiji calls service to living beings as worship of God. You remember what he said, his definition of God. He said, the sum total of all living beings, that is the only God I believe in. So, this is what he calls service to the living beings as worship of God, the sum total of all beings. In the same way, the other type of karma yoga, work for work's sake, comes under jnana yoga. How? Because it is a technique of self-purification. Selfless work removes the veils of impurity, of ignorance that cover the Atman. Swamiji himself explains this point in a conversation with one of his close disciples, Sharat Chandra Chakrabarti. He says, the obstacles to the manifestation of the Atman are overcome by practices laid down in the scriptures. But work has not the power to directly manifest the Atman. It is only effective in removing some veils that cover knowledge. Then the Atman manifests by its own effulgence. So, both Swamiji and traditional Vedanta are agreed on this point, if somebody wants that reassurance. Having said that, there is one special feature that distinguishes Swamiji's teaching from that of traditional Vedanta. In my last 3 lectures, I constantly referred to revered Swami Bhajananandaji Maharaj's articles on prayer, worship, and meditation as spiritual disciplines. He has also written a 2-part article on work as a spiritual discipline. It is on karma yoga. There he writes, according to traditional Vedanta, purification of mind, chitta shuddhi, must be followed by renunciation of all activity, karma sannyasa. Chitta Shuddhi has to be followed by karma sannyasa, and side by side with karma sannyasa, one must engage in this threefold discipline of Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, hearing, reflection, and meditation. The difference between Swamiji's Karma Yoga and traditional Vedanta is Swamiji does not insist on such conditions. When the mind is sufficiently purified, the Atman shines forth spontaneously. This is how we read it in the Bhagavad Gita, if we don't take the help of any commentary. So, Bhajananandaji Maharaj writes, Swamiji actually taught a kind of practical Jnana Yoga. When we say Swami Vivekananda taught a new method of attaining liberation through work, what is meant is that he taught the type of Jnana Yoga that does not require renunciation of work. Rajarshi Janaka is a case in point. But for us, followers of the Ramakrishna Vivekananda tradition, whether Karma Yoga is an independent, self-sufficient path, or whether it is subordinate to Jnana Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, questions like these are wholly irrelevant. We are spiritual seekers, and we are worshippers of the personal impersonal, if I may put it that way. Our spiritual attitude and our spiritual practices are a blend of both bhakti and jnana. Jnana mishrita bhakti. And they can also take the form of karma. Bhakti is expressed through karma. Jnana is also manifest through karma. As long as the path we follow is clean, we are not too particular about which of them directly leads to moksha. We make use of everything. Work is unavoidable. So let us do it in either of the two ways, work for God's sake or work for work's sake, and be free. Leave the hair splitting to scholars and professors. We are in an orchard. Let us enjoy the fruit. Let the statisticians count the number of trees and branches and leaves. So, to return to more practical things, in his famous lecture on work and its secret, Swami Vivekananda says, one of the greatest lessons I have learned in my life is to pay as much attention to the means as to the end. To pay as much attention to the means as to the end. So, in our present context, what is the means and what is the end? Obviously, karma, work, is the means, and moksha, or freedom of the soul, is the end. So, karma is only a means, not an end in itself. The goal of karma yoga, is liberation, a state in which the soul is freed from all bondage. Work for work's sake only means work should be done without selfish motives that bind the soul. It is not karma that binds, it is the selfishness behind it that binds. When that condition is fulfilled, work leads to the state of freedom beyond all work. Naishkarmya. Death may not put an end to all our activities, but liberation will. That is the goal. Through work, to worklessness. Now, just a while ago I said we need to understand the real meaning of the term karma. So, what is karma? Which is generally translated as work or action. We see work happening all around us. Machines work, natural forces work. But we don't call that karma. Why? Because for work to become karma, it must be done by a living being. That is the first characteristic of karma. But that is not enough, because life forces, prana is continuously carrying on activities like breathing, circulation, digestion, and the like within the bodies of all living beings. We don't call them karma. Unless they can be called karma in a sense, only if the living beings consciously feel that those activities are theirs. And subhuman beings don't have this awareness. So the second characteristic of karma is the consciousness of I as the doer, kartritva, the sense of agency. Then, nobody works without a motive, without a purpose. We set ourselves to work with the intention of experiencing the results of our actions. We set ourselves to work with the intention of experiencing the results of our action. All our work is based on an expectation of enjoyment. This is known as enjoyership, bhoktritva, and this is the third characteristic of karma. Then, karma involves moral obligation. We not only act, but we feel responsible for our actions. Only humans have this feeling. Why? Because we have the power of exercising judgment and we have freedom of choice. And because we have these special capacities, all our actions are linked to, all our actions are regulated by certain universal moral laws. Every act that we do, every thought that we think involves a moral choice, a moral decision. We had better be aware of this. This is the fourth characteristic of karma. And finally, every action, physical or mental, has a cosmic effect which returns to the doer as the fruit, as the phala. And that effect determines the doer's birth, life, and environment. Every act of ours, therefore, has a far greater effect than we are aware of. This is the fifth characteristic. So, this is very important. Let's go through it once more. The 5 characteristics that distinguish karma from mechanical work. 1, it is done by a living being. 2, that living being is conscious of its or their doership. 3, the doer always acts with a motive, which in the final analysis is enjoyment. 4, All actions of such a conscious agent are subject to universal moral laws. And 5, every action produces a result that comes back to the doer. So, association with life, integration by an agent, influence of desires, moral obligation, and the inevitability of the cosmic result. This is karma yoga. This is karma. And karma yoga is the spiritual discipline that aims at negativing these factors and breaks the bonds. So let us see how. First of all, what is spiritual discipline? Basically, as we heard it just a while ago, it is the struggle for higher spiritual consciousness. So, to know how Karma Yoga helps us in the attainment of higher consciousness, we must first know the connection between work and consciousness. Work is an activity or movement of life. But are life and consciousness the same? According to Vedanta, no, they are not the same. They are distinct. The Vedantic view of the personality consists of body, mind, and spirit. This we all know. And consciousness belongs only to spirit. The Supreme Spirit, or Brahman, or the individual spirit, or Atman. Everything else, including prana, mind, everything else belongs to the realm of Prakriti, which is insentient, unconscious, according to Vedanta. Life is only a special manifestation of Prakriti. In the Upanishads, the term is used to denote life is prana. In the Kathopanishad, it says, all this universe emerges out of and vibrates in prana. So, life, with all its manifestations, including karma, is distinct from pure consciousness. But in some way, it is also closely connected with it and supported by it. Now, the long and short of it is, the involvement of the spirit in life is bondage, and their separation is liberation. But how the spirit got bound in life in the first place, that is a mystery no philosopher has been able to unravel until now. It has always been a mystery, and so it will remain. As you know, Advaita philosophers solved the problem with their theory of Maya. That is to say, life, everything other than pure consciousness, is unreal, illusory. But then, how to explain this empirical existence that we perceive? You can't deny the world that you are experiencing. So, to account for this, Advaita posits two types of self: the witnessing self and the experiencing self. In Sanskrit, the terms used for the witnessing self is sakshi, and for the experiencing self, karta bhokta. So, to simplify things, maybe it's an oversimplification, the pure self and the ego. The witnessing self, or sakshi, is the pure self-luminous Atman, which is in fact ever free. But when it is limited by by, by the intellect. This is a technical term. By the buddhi. It appears as the empirical self and becomes the agent, the karta of actions, and the experiencer or bhokta of the results of those actions. And bondage applies only to the empirical self, not to the pure self. All Hindu systems of philosophy unanimously hold that the pure self is immutable, changeless, and that change or movement or action belong not to the pure self but to the mind and body, which are only modifications of Prakriti. So, karma is actually a function of Prakriti. But because of the limiting factor of buddhi, the upadhi of intellect, it is called, the self considers itself as the agent. And one of the main qualities of this buddhi is said to be will, ichcha. So it is actually, to be very precise, it is actually this will that is bound. Behind every action, there is the will that supports it. It is the will that is bound, not the pure self. Bhajananandaji makes a very insightful observation here. In that article, he writes, will and I consciousness are the active and passive aspects of the self. This is beautiful. Will and I consciousness are the active and passive aspects of the self. Will may be regarded as a focusing of consciousness. Otherwise, pure consciousness has to be diffuse. It is everywhere. But when you impute the quality of ichcha, then there is automatically a focusing. Otherwise, there is no urge. When we say this world came into being as a result of God's ichcha, then you see that focusing. Just as I consciousness in its true nature is pure and free, so also is will intrinsically free, but in us, it is actually found enslaved by desires. Most of the karma done by us is prompted by this impure, enslaved will. Between the will and the action, desires intervene and change the nature of action. If our will is freed from the hold of desires, then all our actions will be supported and impelled by the pure will. Sadbuddhi and kubuddhi. You get the meanings here. So that was, those were Bhajananandaji's words. But what exactly are these desires? Desires are the sprouting of our samskaras, the latent impressions left in the mind by earlier experiences. Every action and the experience that follows it produce two kinds of effect: a cosmic effect and an individual effect. The cosmic effect returns to me after some time as the karma phala and determines my present conditions. This we just heard. The individual effect is the production of a samskara, an impression in the mind that remains hidden from my conscious awareness for now. Karma phala is irrevocable and unchangeable. I can by no means avert a bad karma phala, which will visit me with unerring certainty. but I can change my bad samskaras, provided I sincerely repent, pray to God, and struggle hard to mend my behavior. This is the law of karma. We may not be free to change our circumstances as we please, but we are fully free as human beings. We are fully free to change ourselves. Now, according to yoga, samskaras are of two types. One is of the nature of desires, drives, impulses, urges, whatever you may call it, everything that prompts us to act. The other is of the nature of memory. So, samskaras are either these forces that drive us to act, and forces that arouse memory. Every action produces in me a tendency to repeat that action, and every experience also gives rise to the memory of it later on. Let me give you an example. If I drink a cup of strong, hot coffee in the morning and like it, it produces in me a tendency, a desire to enjoy another cup. But later on, when I realize that such strong coffee is bad for me, if I struggle against the habit, if I struggle hard enough and eventually conquer it, I may remember my earlier experience without feeling the urge to drink. In fact, I've seen more than one chain smoker who have kicked the habit overnight. That tremendous willpower. If you ask them, they will only say, "We don't think of it." That's all. That is how they do it. So, but usually, desire and memory are so closely interlinked that arousal of the one automatically leads to arousal of the other. The connection between the two will become a sort of reflex, a conditioned reflex, and that is brought about by habit, doing it again and again. So, what should I do to get rid of the harmful habit? Again, we are human beings. So, exercise judgment, make a firm resolve, and put forth repeated effort. Viveka, Vairagya, Abhyasa. You will find this both in the Bhagavad Gita and in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. There is no other way. Put forth repeated effort until the bad habit becomes weak and finally dies. Of course, in the case of other more harmful, dangerous habits, prayer and holy company are of immense help. That also I must say. Anyhow, for us it is good to know how it is karma, action, that produces kama, desire. And it is desire that binds the soul, not memory. To be more precise, when the will, this is again an insight from Bhajananandaji, when the will gets hooked to the desires, that is what binds the soul. A young boy who has never tasted coffee cannot have a desire for it. At best, he may have some curiosity about it, but that is not enough to bind him. Therefore, since desire is produced in the mind through karma, through action, and the connection between it and the will is also generally caused by karma, it is quite logical to suppose that these two effects can also be destroyed through karma. Through right actions, we counteract the evil effects of wrong actions. If karma rouses latent desires, karma, that is counter karma, if you will, counter karma itself can also destroy them. We may ask, why can't right thinking or just meditation accomplish that? Can't it erase the harmful effects of wrong action? Maybe it can, but it is not so easy. It is like we heard, it is like trying to form a strong character by reading books and having nothing to do with practical life. Even if one were partially successful in that, trying to get over, erase the effects of bad karma, just through meditation, even if I were partially successful in that, I would still have to test that in actual life through action. That is why almost all Hindu spiritual traditions regard karma yoga as the necessary, not only necessary, even compulsory discipline for self-purification, for chitta shuddhi. One has to do work. One has to work for work's sake or work for God's sake in order to achieve the required self-purification. Even the great Shankaracharya, he himself says, there is no purification for one who does not work. So we will end our discussion for today here, and in the next part, it'll become even more interesting, because we will see how psychological karma yoga is. We always associate it with work, but it is always the attitude that is influencing the work that is not always, we don't remember that, but we'll keep it for next week. So is there another song? Okay, thank you all for coming and taking part in this meeting. Now I would request all of you to, whoever has the time, to please join us in the basement for some refreshments. Thank you very much. Thank Bhajanananda ji.